Good morning. This is Daniel Dolphin, your host, and welcome to another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. Ladies and gentlemen, our guest today has been a professional farrier for 35 years. He earned his certified journeyman farrier certification in 1991. He has a master's degree in human resource development, 2 bachelor's, a minor, and an associate's degree. He has twice won the AFA's Jim Lindsay Outstanding Clinician Award. He's a 3-time winner of the Outstanding Farrier Education Award. He is an American Farrier Team member, which is the international competing team. He has been a judge at the Calgary Stampede Farrier competitions. He has been in the top 10 of the World Championship blacksmith competitions. He is a fellow of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, one of only 5 Americans to do so, and one of only 40 in the world. He is the first American examiner for the Worshipful Company of Farriers. He is an international clinician, speaker, and author. He has written Gregory's textbook of Farriery. He is in the International Horseshoeing Hall of Fame and the founder of Heartland Horseshoeing School since 1995 in Lamar, Missouri. He is also a man in his early 50s who can still rock a sleeveless T-shirt to the degree that his wife not only cooks supper every night, but dessert too. Mr. Chris Gregory, how are you doing this afternoon?
Nice to be here, Daniel. Thank you.
All right. That gives you a little feel too. We play around a little bit with stuff and everything. If I get a little too silly for you, just tell me to back it up. Chris, we're going to start out like we do every podcast with our lightning round questions, the icebreakers. Are you ready to go?
I am, yes, sir.
All right. What is your favorite way to relax?
Probably just sit back and play guitar.
Morning or evening?
Oh, I'm a morning person. So I'm usually in bed by 9, but it's pretty rare for me to be in bed past 4.
Bay or sorrel?
Oh, bay. Yeah, that's easy.
Does pineapple belong on pizza?
So politically, this is a really, really tough issue. I'm sure you're aware. It's that's so political. I'm worried about touching it, but for me, it does not. But man, you go around the world and they've got some weird pizza. You get down to Brazil or if you get to England, they don't even have any good pizza. But no, my answer is no.
Do you have a particular pet peeve?
I hate people throw cigarette butts on my property.
Okay.
So that's all a pet peeve of mine, yeah.
That's a good one. Favorite beverage?
It's either coffee or water. Sometimes I switch it up and go water or coffee.
Fair enough. Coffee is mostly water, so you're pretty much there all the time. Can you tell us something unexpected about you?
I was a tattoo artist for quite a while, and so a lot of people, that's another little sideline that a lot of people didn't know about. But I guess once people meet me, they think that's a little unexpected.
I've heard on Mullen's Farrier podcast, I guess that's kind of a tradition. A lot of the students wind up getting a tattoo from you while they're there. Is that correct?
It used to be, but once I needed to have these, I quit tattooing. It's a hard thing to fix if you have a problem. So I quit doing it a couple years ago.
Yeah, you kind of just get one shot at that, don't you?
So you put a tattoo on, they don't like it, they got to put it under a train or something. And so it's.
If you could choose any superpower, what superpower would you choose?
I can't remember I don't even know what it's called, but there was a story about a guy who could just disappear and reappear somewhere else. Okay. And so, talk about an advantage. That's way better than super strength or flying or whatever. Just appear somewhere else. That would be a great one.
Like teleportation kind of thing?
All teleportation. Right. You'd probably have the word.
Thoughts or feelings?
Thoughts. Yeah. Yeah, I'm more of a thinker than a feeler.
Do you have a particular favorite piece of tack, or I guess in your case, tool, that's just like somebody messes with that, they're going to have a problem on their hands?
Yeah, my son made me a really sweet clipping hammer. And I mean, it's funny. If you just leave a hot shoe on the anvil and walk away, you come back and the shoe's clipped. So it's pretty mad. Okay. So yeah, that's a hammer that I don't let other people swing.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Do you have a favorite book or movie?
I can't get through a movie. It seems like movies put me plumb out. So I guess Top Gun. If I was going to have to pick one movie that I've watched more than once, it'd be Top Gun, or Braveheart. Braveheart was a good one. I've watched it twice.
Okay.
For my book, I read the Bible every day, and I've been doing that for a long time. So it's my favorite book. But I also like a lot of stuff like stuff by Malcolm Gladwell. He's an incredible writer. There's also Peak was a recent book that I read that I really recommended a lot. And it was by, I think, Anders Ericsson is the name, I believe. But it was about how to learn or how to become good at practicing. So both of those books would be.
Very good. Is there a preventable question or problem that you get sick of answering or dealing with, and you kind of just wish that the world would figure this out and we could lay this to bed?
So I get a lot of emails virtually every week where people asking questions about lameness. And oftentimes they ask a question without enough information for me to even answer. It's like, my horse is lame in the right hind foot. What do you think? And so, that's a question that you after you answer that question so many times by asking all the questions you have to ask, you almost feel like getting rude, but I guess I wish people would make sure they have enough information to give me all the information needed before they ask a question. I don't know if that'll suit, but that's my answer.
No, that's very good. We get a little bit in the horsemanship game. A lot of times it's the other way around. They'd give me a 20-minute dissertation on the history of this horse, and 20 seconds in, I was ready to answer the question. So, but obviously with a hind leg or something, yeah, there's a lot that could go wrong there. We might need to know.
And it might not be the hind leg, but it'll be a similar question.
What is your favorite dinosaur?
Ooh, I'd have to say pterodactyl.
You're the second pterodactyl person that we've had on, so that's interesting.
I think we probably make up a large percentage of the population.
And have you ever had a UFO encounter?
Nope.
All right.
Nope. And I did live 3 years in Roswell, and so I had a good shot at it.
That's interesting. Well, you go to bed early, so that might have you were around at the wrong time. Of course, 4 a.m. probably dark then anyway. Well, very good. We're going to give you, I think, 117 points, which makes you eligible for either a coupon for a unicorn, 50% off anywhere that they're sold, or a genuine compliment. You can choose which you prefer.
I will always go with unicorn.
Okay. We'll get that mail to you tomorrow. So, all right. Well, Chris, I cannot tell you how appreciative I am of you coming on the podcast. And I have to say that of the probably 10 or 15 years I've kind of been dealing with people that are well-known and so forth and cold call it and all, you are the most responsive to emails and on the ball and on top of things I have ever dealt with ever. So I certainly appreciate about some people are making you wait weeks to answer a simple question and so forth. You've been a genuine pleasure to deal with. So thank you for that.
Thank you, sir.
So
I thought I wasn't eligible for the compliment.
Oh yeah. You want the compliment?
No, I thought you just gave it to me. I thought I was only getting a unicorn, and then you complimented me on my responsiveness.
Oh, that was an accidental compliment. I apologize. That slips out every once in a while. I'll try to keep it under control. I hate to pose this question, but I kind of have to, because I'm sure a lot of people won't necessarily know who you are, since this is a little more horsemanship focused, and you're obviously in an adjacent industry. But could you give us the 30,000 foot view of who Chris Gregory is, your past to present, and what you typically do and so forth?
Well, so I grew up on a ranch in New Mexico and left home at 15, went to military high school, went from high school to college on a rodeo scholarship. I was a steer wrestler. So at 18, I thought I'd make Roy Duval look like a pretender. You know, my whole dream was just to bid the NFR every year of my life. And, but I was shoeing horses. And so I'd go to rodeo and I'd be shoeing, gobs of horses for other people. And my rodeo career just went right through the cellar, and my shoeing career kept going up and up and up. And because military school was so hard, college was quite easy. The military school I went to was in Roswell, New Mexico Military Institute. And man, that is a really great place to be from, but it's a really tough place to be at. But it did set me up for a lot of who I am. So I enlisted when I got out of high school, and I was in the reserves for 7 years. So I got out in '94. I was a lieutenant in a reserve unit for an infantry reserve unit out in Colorado. And we moved to Missouri and opened Heartland. So one of our main tenets, the way I treat my students in life really, is our training is super difficult. If you can get through the Heartland, even if you don't graduate, if you can make it here the whole time, man, the rest of your career is going to be pretty easy. I've had students call me 5 years after they've been here and said it was cold and it was muddy and the horses were nasty and the customers were mean, and it was the worst day I've ever had, except for in the Heartland. It was easier than my easiest day in the Heartland. I mean, it was hard. So because of that training, and because we approach it in that way, we do set people up. And I'd say I approach life kind of that way. So I don't know if that's what you're asking, Daniel, but that's how I describe it.
That's very good. And I have to say, we're going to definitely put links to Heartland, your website and Facebook page and all that stuff in the show notes description. But I mean, I want to go at some point myself. Earning my CJF is one of those bucket list items for me. But I particularly want my son to go. He thinks at this point, he's 15. He's pretty sure he wants to be a large animal veterinarian for horses. And I keep telling him, man, if you can get your CJF before you finish your bachelor's and you go into vet school, a CJF, you're going to have a whole different experience than the rest of those kids. When it comes to lameness times with horses in the barn, you're going to be helpful and a peer rather than sitting there wondering what collateral and bifurcate mean and so forth, So
well, not only that, paying your way through college. So I was in college from 86 to 91, got married in 88. So my wife and I have been married for 30 plus years, but we graduated with $12,000 cash and no debt. And this was the time in my life where I was getting $23 to shoe a horse. So if you are college bound and you know how to shoe horses, you can write your own ticket. And if you're going to be a vet, man, it opens the world to you in ways that other vets, they don't even imagine.
Yes, sir. We'll see if he's smart enough to listen to old dad or not. But anyway.
Well, good luck with that, Daniel.
Well, why don't you, since we're talking about Heartland, why don't you tell us a little bit about that and the different courses that you have and sort of the structure of it and so forth?
Well, it's a unique school. We're only open for 27 weeks a year. We have 3 weeks of advanced classes, the Farrier blacksmith workshop that we have in the early part of the season, which is February or March. That is for somebody that's never done any forging. If they wanted to come and they're going to build their first toe bin, that's the place to do it. Or we have a lot of guys getting ready for their journeyman or getting ready for, maybe world championship contests or getting ready for their AW, whatever. Then we have a 12-week or a 24-week program. We run March to September, pretty much. We call it the 24-week program. We call it the journeyman program. And then the 12-week program, we call the professional farrier program, professional farrier course. So this last year, and we only train about 35 people a year. So this last year, we had 7 people that got fully certified from the time they came in March till the end of the season. And we had 2 that got their journeyman. And so, from going from nothing to a journeyman in a year is pretty substantial. But of course, they had to work really, really hard to do that. And then we have a certification course or a certification workshop in October. It's 5 days. You spend 5 days with me and Cody getting under horses and shoeing towards certification standards. And then we have 2 certifications that weekend. So it's a fantastic venue for there's a lot of guys that shoe horses every day, shoe them really, really well, but the certification is tough because they don't know what the standard is, or they don't know exactly how to achieve the detail that they're looking for. So that day, that week tunes them up for that day.
I was just going to say the certifications are very specific, where you may shoe horses in this style because of the area you live in. The certification doesn't really account for that, does it? You're going to do it exactly like this, period. the end. So it may be a little out of the box for what most guys are used to on a daily basis.
Yes, basically they're giving you a prescription and they want you to fill the prescription. So, the argument about whether or not it's right for the horse or not is not really part of it. And I think I have a horse that just walked by my window. I may need to call somebody. So can I text somebody while we're doing this?
Absolutely. Go. Like I said, we can edit it. So you can take all the time you want.
Oh yeah. She closed the yard gate. So we're all good. All right. Sorry. She didn't tell me she'd done that. Blueberry is I am his emotional support human. And so.
All right, sir.
Well, no worries. So you pretty well take people from beginner to all the way up the certified journeyman farrier, which is the highest level of certification the AFA has. Is that correct?
It is, yes, sir. If they're willing to put in their work, we'll do our part. But obviously, a person who's going to achieve that level is going to have to do an awful lot of work on their own. Beyond the journeyman, just so that people know, there are some endorsement exams, like the therapeutic endorsement or the foraging endorsement.
So one of the things that I wanted to bring up, I've heard of this little mystery. So apparently there are some people that go through your school, and in addition to foraging and horseshoeing, they get pretty good at doing push-ups. So would you maybe tell us about that? And can you confirm or deny that Brian Mullins had to do any push-ups, and if so, how many?
So okay, so people are paying me a lot of money to teach them how to earn a living shoeing horses. And you will never, ever lose a customer for not cussing, but you can sure lose a customer for cussing. So if a student cusses around my wife, myself, or my son, or if they cuss at all, we find out. And then they got to do push-ups for that. And so that's where most of our students get caught. And then we also have quiz time. So we'll be driving down the road and I'll say something like, Daniel, give me the origin, insertion, and interosseous muscle. And so you have several choices. You can answer the question. That is the best option. Or you can write one page over the answer to turn in the next day. Or you can do 10 push-ups or 1 minute in the green chair. And the green chair is just a wall sit, basically. Huh? And so Brian Mullins, he's pretty careful with his language. But I think he probably let a bad word slip because he is Canadian. And so I would guess I probably have dropped Brian before.
And I should say I don't know him. I mean, I've listened to his podcast. I love his podcast, so I feel like I know him. But I just thought that was when am I going to get the opportunity to learn things like that other than right now, right? So you got to take your swing.
Well, I tell you, if you came to the blacksmith workshop it starts February 28th next year, or become the certification, he comes to those virtually every time. So you'd have a chance to really get to know Brian. And what a great guy. He's a fantastic gentleman.
He seems like it. I like his podcast a lot. I've stolen a few elements from his, like those short answer questions and so forth. I didn't figure most of my customers would know what the stratum pictorium is, so I just call them short answer questions. But anyway.
Well, there's a lot of people that have told me they've read my book cover to cover, but he is the only person that has proof because he read it onto tape. It's going to be available audio later this winter. Yeah, that's kind of cool because he's got a good voice. I think it'd be neat.
That's cool. Very good. Is there anything in terms of relationship building that every farrier wishes their customer knew? Maybe like the cussing at school is sort of a set of standards, a code of conduct. What do farriers wish that the owners knew to uphold as a code of conduct or a relationship standard?
Probably for the average farrier. So I should preface this that I do not shoe horses for a living. And my newest customer I've been shoeing for since 1997. So I have a different perspective than most farriers. But I do know that if you have a person that is, let's say a person is a drywaller and they come up to the horseshoer and say, I don't know anything about what you're doing, but this is what I want you to do to the horse's foot. There is no faster way to make a farrier mad than to start a conversation like that. My dad was a brilliant man, and he's one of the smartest men I ever met. And he used to want to get me to do things. So you're talking about your son going to horseshoeing school. So my dad, he was trying to teach me how to shave, which I'm not very good at. And I never did want to shave as a kid. And he told me one time, he said, I was in the Army with this guy named Bob Johnson, and Bob used to do it this way. And then he would teach me more or less by blaming someone else for the lesson I was getting. So one way a horse owner might approach a horseshoer in this manner would say, I was really interested because I saw that Bob Johnson, his horse, had this on the foot. What does that all mean? And then it sets it up where the horseshoer can answer the question, and the horse owner can kind of get it across. So you might say to your son, yeah, I don't know if vet school or horseshoeing school would be right for you, but man, I do know Dr. Bob Johnson, and he was a horseshoer first. Now he makes $900,000 a year because he's such a great lameness vet, So there's the way you approach that particular situation with a horseshoer is delicate. And if you're a horse owner, you probably know what I'm talking about.
So ask for education rather than assuming they don't have any and you need to teach them.
We all feel like we know how to do our job, but a lot of horse owners are after something that doesn't make sense. And if it doesn't make sense anatomically, then it doesn't make sense for the horse. So my personal stance is I won't ever do anything that I know will intentionally cause harm to a horse. It doesn't matter what the owner wants. Mm-hmm. And so if I have an owner, here's a really good example. It used to be in New Mexico anyway that the horse owners would not want you to touch the heels. They want to really stand those horses' feet up, make them steep, make them really steep. Okay, well, that's okay if you have a horse that needs to be steep. But if you make a horse artificially steep past his natural angle, then you put stress on the superficial flexor tendon, the suspensory ligament, and you relax stress on the deep flexor tendon, and you move the horse's foot in relation to his trunk. So you've done a lot of things mechanically that can be detrimental to the horse. So then if you have a bowed superficial flexor tendon or a sprained suspensory ligament, it could be because you made the horse too steep. And if you did that because the owner or the trainer required you to do that, and if you knew better, then you're really kind of at fault. So, but if the horse owner really wants that, he can say, hey, Bob Johnson's horse is like that. What's going on? And a good farrier will be able to draw a diagram, explain the relationship of the deep flexor tendon to the superficial flexor tendon, the suspensory ligament to hoof angle, and come up with a solution and a strategy. Mm-hmm. Now, if your farrier is not good enough to understand that, then, maybe shopping for a farrier is part of that too. I don't know.
Well, I had this question a little further down, but this is the perfect time to ask. So as an owner, what should you be looking for in a farrier, and how might you know when it would be time to change or whether you've got one that you need to bake cookies for and do whatever you need to do to keep them? What would you be looking for as an owner in a farrier?
So at the end of the day, if the shoes stay on and the horse stays sound and is able to do its job, then really the boxes are being ticked. So from that perspective, you can't really argue against the horseshoer if the shoes stay on, the horse stays sound and able to do its job. However, there's definitely a long-term potential problem if you do bad shoeing. So you can have horses are so forgiving, and you can shoe a horse in an incorrect angle for, let's say, a year, and then the accumulation of that, it ends up becoming a lameness problem that nobody expected, and probably could have been avoidable. But again, that's also a little bit of a question. I guess as a horse owner, your only real weapon is education. So if you know a lot about what you're looking for, for instance, for me, I'm not a mechanic. I don't even change my own oil. And so I am at the mercy of whatever mechanic I take my truck to. And as a result, I need to ask other car owners, is this a good mechanic, or I need to look at the reputation or look at my past experience with this mechanic. And as long as that all stays good, then I'm happy because I can drive my truck and it can get me from point A to B, and it's satisfying my requirements. So I don't really need to find a certified journeyman mechanic, that I don't have to take my truck 2 hours away to get serviced because my mechanic is good enough. Anatomy is your biggest foundational block to understand, because if it doesn't make sense anatomically, it doesn't matter how shiny it is, it doesn't matter how well it's represented, it doesn't matter how nice it's packaged. If it doesn't make sense anatomically, it doesn't make sense.
So could you give us a few examples of things that farriers might be blamed for routinely some of the cliches that they really don't have any control over, like maybe cracks in the hoof, or let's say I look at this one particular horse and his hairline is never, parallel. It always is kind of dumping to the inside or something like that. Is that necessarily a red flag on your farrier? Or you had mentioned shoes staying on. If a horse, we occasionally have a shoe ripped off or something, like I know as a trainer, if I'm losing front shoes, that could easily be the fault of the rider in the way that they're handling the horse and not necessarily have anything to do with the farrier. So is losing shoes now and again a red flag, or?
No, it's not a surprise that we lose shoes. What the real surprise is that we don't lose more. I mean, think about what we're doing. I mean, we're nailing on a piece of metal on a 1,000-pound animal that's going to be asked to do stuff that it wouldn't do naturally. And we're only putting it on with 6 nails. So lost shoes are as much a part of life of horse ownership as a flat tire is on your vehicle. It can't be avoided, and there's no way you'll ever be able to avoid it 100%. And it doesn't mean you have a bad farrier. If you lose the same shoe on the same horse every 2 weeks for several cycles, then the farrier does need to be looking at his technique to see if there's something that can be fixed on that particular horse. But it's lost shoes. It's unfortunate, but it's actually surprising it doesn't happen more than it does. Clips are something that if they're put on a horse's foot and they're put in well, they're burned in. Sometimes the horse owner will see clips on a horse and they'll blame weird stuff on clips. They'll say, "Oh, my horse was stumbling because you put clips on him." Clips are just not, at least in North America, they're not as much a part of shoeing a horse as they are in other parts of the world. But clips take shearing force off nails. So clips are a way to actually make your shoes stay on better, or make them fit better to the horse's foot, in my opinion. What else? Just kind of.
So cracks, or white line disease, and some of those other common things that farriers might get blamed for that they really have.
Yes, so we can kind of help head it off. So if we see the beginning of white line disease, putting in some hoof clay or whatever treatment you like, that can often head it off. But also in our particular practice, we see very little white line disease, and I am kind of convinced that it's from hot fitting. So the act of hot shoeing your horse every time you get shod, you kill all the fauna and flora you were about to nail on under that cold shoe. So just the act of hot fitting, I believe, gives us a death sentence for the white line disease once every 6 weeks. We also get blamed for lamenesses that often are not our fault. It's human nature to just blame the horseshoer if the horse goes lame. But if a horse goes lame really over 7 days from the shoeing, it's probably not from that shoeing. So if you have a hot nail, even if you have a close nail, it's going to be rearing its ugly head, or even sole pressure. All of those, if they were going to be lameness producing, they're probably going to happen within 3 days. And by the time you get to 7 days, if it's beyond that, it's very, very unlikely, I should say, that it was the horseshoer's fault.
Okay.
We'll have a horse 6 weeks in, and they'll call up and say, "Hey, my horse is lame. He must have had a bad nail." And it's weeks and he was shod. It's unfortunate, but that's the way it is.
What importance would you put on maintaining a good cycle with horses and having that stuff done regularly versus the customer that just calls you every once in a while and you show up 4 months after you did the horse and the same shoes are still on him and so forth? What, in terms of anatomy and biomechanics and all, what sort of an effect do you feel like that has, and how important is the regular cycle, 6 weeks or whatever it is?
Well, it is critical to the longevity and the performance of your horse. So if you think about the length of a horse's foot, we mainly do cutting horses in my personal practice, quarter horse types. So a 3 1/4 inch toe length would be about right. A horse is going to grow 1/4 millimeter a day. So in 28 days, they have 1/4 inch. So if his foot was only 3 1/4 to start with, in 28 days, it's 1/4 inch longer. In 56 days, it's now 1/2 inch longer. Well, 1/2 inch is a pretty large percentage of 3 1/4 inches. So the difference in leverage and the leverage arm that the toe has, the amount of force that can be generated through the joints and the tendons, all of those are increased by the toe length. So and not only that, but the horse's anatomy changes to the stresses that are put upon it. So if you let a horse's foot get to 4 inches or 4.5 inches, and then his body is starting to adjust to this situation that the feet are in, and then you come along and you trim it back to 3.25 inches. Now the horse is having to deal with that. You're making the change in an hour, but it took months for it to happen. And then if a owner takes a horse roping or goes cutting or goes on a long trail ride right after a drastic change, you can certainly cause problems. So if you keep your horses on a tight schedule, not only do you kind of ensure that the feet stay pretty close to the same, but you also maintain a relationship with your farrier. Horseshoer, if I know I'm going to see the same person every 6, 7, or 8 weeks, whatever plan we have, I feel like I have a loyal customer that I can count on. And when they call me, I'm available. If I have a person that I'm going to see for hunting season once a year for the 4th of July parade, if they call me and it's not convenient for me, I'm probably not going.
Mm-hmm. That's fair enough. A lot of people don't really take into account that farriers are running a business and they have to be business minded about it. And I think some farriers need to realize they need to be a little more business minded about it too.
Well, I often say that there's 5 boxes you need to check to be a great farrier. So one of them is your ability to trim feet. So nippers, knife, rasp, that sort of stuff. The other one is your forging ability. You can't be great in the forge, bad on feet, be a great farrier. You can't be great on feet and bad in the forge, and still considered to be a great farrier. But the other 3 are the horsemanship, the pure theoretical knowledge, your knowledge of anatomy, conformation, gaits, etc. But then the last one is business. So if you were going to only pick one to be a master at, if you're going to earn a good living, you can be a master at the business and average the rest and still have a great income.
Well, you're bringing up a lot of points here. If we could give the general horse owning public, let's say 3 tips of things that they should do or shouldn't do to have the most bang for their buck effect on their horse's hooves, what things would you suggest?
I would say, first of all, make sure that you do your homework and find the best farrier that you can possibly afford in your area. That'd be number 1. Number 2, I would stay on schedule. That's probably as critical as anything, and we've already talked about that at length. And for me, I would be looking for a professional that is trying to become better. Somebody that's hot shoeing or that's engaged in certification or pursuing contests. Those kind of individuals, the horseshoeing is more than a job. It is a passion. And if this is a passion, you're going to get as good a farrier as there is in your area.
What about, like, I've heard horseshoers mention that for people that are feeding sweet feed, that there's a certain sort of a hoof. They can take their knife and cut into the sole and it's got a look or a feel to it. They kind of immediately know. Have you perceived any things like that or not really?
No, I think by conversation, there's no doubt that better nutrition leads to better feet, but it doesn't mean that I could say, oh, well, okay. All right. So here's the deal. You can take a horse from one situation that is on, let's say, very minimal grass, poor grass hay, and put them in another situation where they're getting fed proper supplements, proper nutrition, proper vitamins, minerals, everything, and you will see a difference in the foot. But to say that you're seeing, oh, I can see you started sweet feed last month, I think you'd be pretty amazing if you could see that through your knife.
Okay. Well, you did mention horsemanship a few minutes ago as one of the 5 boxes that horseshoers need to tick. So I'm a horsemanship guy. So what do you see industry wide? Like, for most of the, I'm assuming kids, I'm gonna assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that most of the people coming to you are fairly young. Do you find that there is a lack of horsemanship in the industry, or?
So we get such a wide gamut. I had a boy this year that had never touched a horse until he came to school. And then I've had a guy that was shoeing horses for 35 years before he came to school. So I really can't say that this is what we're seeing in our student base. But horsemanship, not only is it one of the most lacking things for a young horseshoer, it is one of the hardest things to teach when you're also trying to teach them to shoe a horse. So we use a no-veil headstall, and I don't know if you use that as a training aid, but it's not because I'm trying to teach them to train horses. It's because I'm trying to keep them from getting killed shoeing horses. Mm-hmm. So it's a big difference, you know. Sure. But the no-veil headstall, if it's used correctly, that thing has been a very much a magic thing for us compared to, and we don't drug horses, don't spend a lot of time round pinning them. We will do, last year they were keeping track, and we did one week, we did 381 head. So we're doing those kind of numbers. I've got to keep these kids alive from all over the place with all these different backgrounds in a very dangerous situation. So the no-veil headstall has allowed me to do that.
So you don't put just a little duct tape on their lip and solve it that way or anything?
No, I think that's a lot more common in California than it is in Missouri. Have you tried that? I haven't actually tried it.
I have not. I think it's about time for our commercial sponsor. And I'm going to apologize to you. This is a competing entity, but they offered me so much money for this sponsorship of this podcast that I couldn't turn it down. So the podcast today is sponsored by the Totally Thrifty Titan Trimmer, available as a battery operated or plug-in tool. The Totally Thrifty Titan Trimmer will save you time and money with carbide tipped chainsaw teeth and over 3,500 RPMs. Never stand around waiting for that expensive farrier again or overpay for an hour of some sweaty guy's time. You can definitely take charge of your horse's hooves with the Totally Thrifty Titan Trimmer. Every Titan owner gets a 17-minute instructional video showing you everything you need to know to safely operate cutting tools around sensitive tissues. All horses have a safe zone red fluid indicator to let you know you've gone too far. And hooves also grow constantly. So how badly can you really screw this up? Professional farriers are expensive, so amateurs are definitely cheaper. Save with the Totally Thrifty Titan Trimmer. Not responsible for accidental wounds incurred to either horse or human, and gloves and hoof stand are not included. So I hope we didn't offend you with that one, Chris. But like I said, they paid a lot to be on this particular podcast. So,
well, yeah, congratulations on getting your sponsor. Good job.
So we've talked a little bit about certification and so forth. Would you give us sort of the bird's eye view of what some of the different associations and levels of certification and so far are? Like I know you're triple certified. If I'm correct there under Fitz, the worshipful company. And so go ahead and tell us about it.
Yes, sir. AFA has a certified farrier, which is shoeing with cake shoes. You have 2 hours to take a written exam. You have 1 hour to shoe 2 feet with cake shoes for the certified, and then the multiple choice written exam. The journeyman is 2 hours for 4 handmade. So you do the whole horse, and it's handmade with clips. You make a bar shoe to a pattern, and you have a written exam, and they're a very, very good standard. I think it's a great exam. It's been around a long time, and a very good milestone for a farrier to try to achieve. The Worshipful Company, they've been around since 1356, so their history is pretty extensive. In order to shoe horses in the United Kingdom on your own, you have to have a diploma of the Worshipful Company of Farriers, and you can't take the exam until you've been an apprentice for 4 years and 2 months. So 50 months into your training is when you get to take your exam, and you only get 2 shots. If you fail it after your second shot, you can't shoe horses for a living. So it's quite a tough exam. They do 2 feet with handmade shoes in 2 hours. They take a written exam where they actually have to write the answers. Then they do a shoe display and an oral exam and a horse evaluation. It's a pretty good exam. The associateship, you do 2 feet in 2 hours, and it used to be we had a super huge list of shoes that we had to shoe. I took that exam in '97, and you didn't know what those shoes were going to be, so it was such a big list. It was pretty tough. But then the written exams, 5 questions I spent 2.5 hours. I wrote 27 pages handwritten and 5 pages of diagrams in 2.5 hours. So it was a pretty extensive written exam. Then you do an oral exam that it feels there's a lot of pressure on the oral exam. You got the white coats sitting there at the table. You're on the other side. They're chasing you down rabbit holes. So the oral exam is pretty good. There's a modern farriery, so you might have to glue a shoe on or do a quarter crack repair or a resection or something. And then you present a shoe display. So that's a very, very good exam. It's probably the hardest exam that I had taken as a farrier. And then the fellowship is changed a little bit now, but it used to be the practical was you made a shoe for a dead foot. So the practical was pretty easy, but the theoretical part was really hard. The oral exam was quite hard. You had 1 hour to prepare a 30-minute lecture over an unknown topic. They basically hand you a card and it says, this is your topic, and you have 1 hour to prepare a lecture. It's become easier with the internet. Well, maybe it's become easier, maybe it's harder, but at least with the internet, a guy that gets that situation can look up on his phone some of the key points and bullet points to making the lecture. Back when I took it in 98, the internet was not nearly what it is now. So basically you were in the library and they give you your topic and you just had to make your lecture. And you also present a thesis. So you write a 3,000 word thesis and they go over that. And so I took that in 98. So got that. And then the FITS exam started. I did some clinics in Brazil. They asked me to write an exam for their national association, and it became their national exam. And then I had already judged an exam in South Africa, but then they called me like a year later and asked me to do an exam for them. And they wanted me to write the exam. And I had just written the one for Brazil. And I talked to the guys in Brazil. They said, yeah, you can use that. So it became the Farrier's International Testing System. And it's been used quite extensively now. So it's all over Australia and Argentina and Mexico and Brazil and South Africa. We've had it in a lot of places and the U.S. So its highest level is the AFS, the ASF, Advanced Skills Farrier. And Brian Mullins just completed that, by the way, a couple months ago. So it's a very hard test. Your practical side, you shoot the front end with a straight bar, egg bar, heart bar, or W shoe. You don't know until you draw for it on the day. And the hind feet are 3/4 fullered handmaids with quarter clips. So it was a tough test. I took the test. I don't know. It's been probably 10 years ago, maybe a little less, maybe 8 years ago. We were hosting an exam. I had an examiner from Scotland. I had an examiner from South Africa, and I had a couple of interim examiners. And I said, "Hey guys, can I take the test? Because I'd never taken it." And they said, "Sure." And it come close to getting me. It was harder than I expected.
What portion of those tests do you think the time factors in? Is that what tends to get people as the clock runs out? Or like the certified farrier with an hour? I've watched enough of the videos on your YouTube that it seems like a good many of those people kind of run out of time. I know that I've done like colt starting competitions and stuff, and me not having a clock is very different than me having a clock. It makes a huge difference to me.
Yep.
Even though I would normally do it in a certain period of time, when all of a sudden you put that line there, it's a game changer for me. So how big of a part is the clock in those exams?
The clock is huge because of people's mental games, and not because, like you said, you could do it in that amount of time if time wasn't a factor. But as soon as somebody says go and pushes a start, then the mental game, it ends up getting some people. For me, I don't know why, but it was always great for me. Like my best work would be under the clock. But there are some students we've had. Oh man, I don't know how many students over my career, but they'll do wonderful and they'll be beautiful job. And I'll say, okay, let's do your final horse. And I say, go. And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, don't cut his leg off. So it's an interesting thing. And that book Peak that I told you about, that book will really, really help people kind of get ready for that kind of situation.
Yeah. There's one I read years and years ago. I think it was toughness training for sports, and it was kind of like that a mental preparation book. But it got a lot into the getting enough sleep and that kind of thing, and really getting yourself prepared and putting your best foot forward rather than kind of winging it as people tend to do.
Yeah, it's funny how they do that, but you're correct.
I've got you. One of the things that I'm kind of big on in the horsemanship deal is industry trends and fads that come along. And certainly the farrier world has its share of those sorts of things. So if you're brave enough to walk into the forest here, I've got a few that I thought I would question you on. And the first is you had mentioned the hoof growing at 1/4 of a millimeter. I have said this publicly for years when I'm forced to talk on this topic, and I will let you decide whether this is a good way to say it or not. But to me, the difference between like an A+ premium shoeing job and a pretty good shoeing job is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 1/2 millimeter to 1 millimeter. And the difference between a good enough shoeing job and a crippling a horse shoeing job is probably, again, like 1 millimeter to 2 millimeters. So it's not a game where we really have a whole lot of play one way or another. Like you were talking about standing a horse up on his heels and so forth. The window of correct angle there isn't a massive window. So would you agree with me on that, or you think the allowances are more than that, or what?
The margin for error is incredibly small. And so when you're driving a nail, you're driving it within millimeters of, like you said, crippling a horse. And then you factor in the rest of it, that every horse's foot is different. And you may have a horse that doesn't want you under him while you're doing it. So you're doing it in the midst of a battle, if you will. There's some really surprising things. Like, we don't lose more shoes than we do. That's a surprise. We don't cripple more horses than we do. That's also a surprise. But I will tell you one thing that I have experienced is if somebody doesn't know any better, they can get away with some heinous horseshoeing. So if they know better and they do it, they're going to cripple a horse. If they don't know better, it's like the horse is like, oh, all right, I'm going to forgive you. I'll take that nail. And you'll have some guy that just nailed a piece of metal on a foot so horribly bad, and the horse is still sound, but you knew if you did that the horse would be laid in the corner of the stall blowing on his foot.
Yeah, there's a particular one in my area, and this is one of the questions I had for you too, is how accurate the hairline is if we're looking at medial lateral balance. So I've kind of heard both ways that if you look at the hairline on medial lateral balance, that it's a pretty good gauge, and I've heard that if you x-ray the foot, you'll find that the hairline really doesn't correlate nearly as much as we tend to think it does. But there's a particular farrier around here that you could walk a horse up to me and I would say, oh yeah, so-and-so did him, because the hairlines are going to tip to there's a big right-handed farrier syndrome going on that one or something like that. So what are your thoughts on the hairline?
Well, this is pretty simple because you can take it back to the knowledge of anatomy. So the hairline or the coronary band is a very flexible tissue, and we can move it very quickly by how we trim a foot. So if it is flexible, how good a indicator of hoof balance to the joints and bony column can it be? Because those are not nearly as changeable. Okay, so I tell people that want to balance to a horse's coronary band, I say, well, man, if you look at somebody and his let's say his right sideburns long, maybe you should wedge up his right foot to kind of make him level again, and then you can get his sideburns level. So it is an indicator of something that's happening and how the foot is growing and how it's been trimmed and how it's bearing weight, but it is not necessarily telling you everything you need to know on how to trim a foot. Same thing for the frog, same thing for the position and the position and how the bars look. All of those are little pieces of the puzzle, but they are not the entire picture. So we have the long axis, which is the straight T line that will go through the cannon bone, through the pastern, to the center of the hoof. And if we compare that to the bottom of the foot, that would be considered our medial lateral balance. But then if that looks good in the air and it looks different on the ground, we have to go with what happens on the ground, because that's how the horse bears weight. So where people get in the most trouble with hairline trimming is on the hind feet. You'll find a lot of people that trim to the hairline on the hind feet, that the horse's hind feet are way outside the bony column when the foot is on the ground, because oftentimes the medial coronary band will be higher on the medial side of the hind foot than the lateral side. So they trim more off the medial side, which makes the foot push away from the center line or the axis, the long axis. So in reality, the hairline is just an indicator, but it's not the answer. Is that too much of an answer?
No, absolutely. So for instance, if we took a horse on concrete and we put a rasp down under half of his foot, even with a shoe on, we would see the hairline adjust for that, correct? Where we know the bones.
The hairline will adjust over time, and in Louisiana, it's going to adjust fairly fast. So in New Mexico, where I grew up, if you had a sheared heel or if you had a proximal coronary displacement in the quarter, it might take a week or two to adjust. But in Louisiana, let's say you know what a sprung heel is on a horseshoe, where a horse steps on one heel, pulls the heel down, but the shoe doesn't come off?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if the shoe doesn't come off, and then you go there and you pick up the foot, and the heel is actually touching the heel of the shoe, well, that happened. And if you look at the coronary band, that coronary band will have the bulb will have dropped on that one side. The coronary band will have a hump, what we consider proximal coronary displacement, where the apex of that bend is. So if that can happen over the course of one shoeing, or in Louisiana, it could happen in the course of a few hours. If that coronary band changes so quickly, using it as a guide foot trim off the bottom can be a big mistake.
Well, I guess that covers medial lateral balance. What about, this is one of those words that I'm starting to cringe every time I hear it, which seems daily, breakover. We need to adjust the breakover. I need more breakover on this horse. Do you want to puke when you hear that, or are you good?
No, I really like having the conversation with people, because first of all, you have to describe or give a true definition of breakover. So for me, breakover is the last instant, the last millisecond the toe is in contact with the ground. What is your definition, Daniel?
I would agree. That's one of those really important things when you're riding that you learn to feel. When the foot is about to leave the ground is a key moment of influence when you're riding.
Okay. So when somebody says they want more breakover, exactly what does that mean?
I think it means chop all the toe off and move the shoe back about 3/4 of an inch. But anyway, that's the colloquialism of it.
All right. Okay. So, and a lot of times the horse owner will say they want that because it'll speed the foot up. Have you heard that?
Yes, definitely.
All right. So what if you did that to the right foot and not the left foot? And then the horse was going to go out at a trot for, let's say, a half mile. If you only did the right foot, not the left foot, would the right foot get there ahead of the horse? We have a space-time continuum problem, right?
Uh-huh.
And so what really happens is you change your leverage arm. And so if you move breakover back, the horse has a less leverage arm to do its job. So it would be the equivalent of putting a bald tire on a truck or going snorkeling without flippers. So if I have a lame horse, okay, so here's the analogy I often use. I have a pretty bad knee. I've unfortunately I'm cashing checks that I wrote when I was young, like many of us do as we get old. But if I go snorkeling, it can be pretty hard on my knee. So if I go snorkeling without the flippers, it's much easier on my knee, but I can't go very far very fast. So the flippers gives me the leverage arm to really go further faster, but it's harder on my knee. So if I have a horse that is lame, a increased breakover, they want to call it that, or if I change the leverage arm by moving breakover back with a rocker toe, rolled toe, square toe, or just setting the shoe back, any of those four things, I have decreased the leverage arm on that foot, and I can make the horse that is a little bit sore maybe more comfortable. But if I take a horse that's completely sound and there's no problem whatsoever, and I move the breakover back, I have reduced that horse's athleticism and his ability to do his job because I reduced his God-given leverage arm anyway. So if my knee and my hip and my ankles all feel good, I want those flippers so I can snorkel the way I want to snorkel. And so if the horse is sound, changing or reducing your leverage arm, I think is a big mistake. You know, you talk to barrel racers are, you know, they're the thousandths of a second. If you have a barrel racer who's insisting on a rocker toe or something, she is insisting that you take her out of the money. It's crazy.
So would it be fair to correlate that not every single horse needs a natural balance shoe on it? Is that a fair statement to make? Or?
That's not only a fair statement; it's a very accurate statement. So have you ever heard the teaching from a horseshoeing instructor that would tell you, look at how the horse's foot is worn because he's telling you how he wants you to trim the foot? Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's where the natural balance is kind of based on. They took these horses in the Great Basin, the toe was worn off, and they said, well, this must be how a horse's foot wants to be because of how these feral horses are. But I don't wear my shoes the way I want my feet to be. I don't, when I wear out my shoes, I wear out my lateral heel. And so then my ankles get sore, my knee gets sore, my hips get sore, my back gets sore. I need new shoes. But I don't take my new shoe and my old shoe and rasp the lateral heel off my new shoe. It would be stupid to do that. So if I'm not doing that to my own boot, why would I do it to a horse's foot? So the wear that you see, the wear pattern you see on a horse's foot or on his shoe is telling you this is where we need more protection. This is where he needs more material is going to give him more leverage if you build it up or protect it or shoe it in a way that is stronger. So the natural balance, in my opinion, was based on a theory that doesn't actually make sense anatomically. It should have been the opposite, in my opinion. Now, I know that's probably going to be a really hot button. I've only put on one pair of natural balance shoes my whole career, and I didn't think it was going to hurt the horse. And the vet was insistent, and the owner had them, so I didn't mind. But it's if I want that shape on a shoe, I can very easily do it. When you're hot shoeing, it's as easy to make that shape or as another shape.
Mm-hmm. I've played down that rabbit hole a little bit myself. I don't know if I've said this or not, but I shoe my own horses, and I have been I probably just did trimming for 4 or 5 years, and then I've been shoeing mine for now 6 or 7 years. And I've had a couple of mentors. I haven't been to a school. I don't do it professionally for other people, or, if I have a close friend or something that needs a little help. So I've got about 30 head here that I keep trimmed and shot as needed and so forth. And I'm a big experimenter when it comes to stuff. So if something comes across me, then I say, well, hey, I'm going to throw that on 3 horses and see what it does. When I started playing with breakover too much, I started feeling horses it was like they were falling forward and had to catch up. They were trying to get their front legs back up underneath them the whole time. So I guess I chased the breakover thing for a little while, and now I'm a lot more likely to leave some toe and keep it up there. And I got my stride length back and a lot of the things that I lost. So you live and you learn.
Did you have more overreaching with the rocker toe?
I did. I sure did.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. So people say, well, let's put a rocker toe on because it's going to speed my feet up, and they think it's going to get the feet out of the way faster, but actually the foot moves back in the timing of the horse's stride. And so when the foot moves back, as you said, the horse was like trying to get his feet in front of him, but it's because they're starting so far behind them, they're more likely to hit them. With overreaching, the one old textbook used to say you speed up the front, slow down the hinds. Have you ever read that? Mm-hmm. We did that to a lady. She rode her horse to the school, and it was hitting every step. So we sped up the front, slowed down the hinds. When she got to McDonald's back in town, she had to wait 10 minutes for the hind feet to get there because we had the front end doing 10 miles an hour, and the back end was only doing 9 miles an hour. So, it's impossible, but it sounds really clever when you say it, but it doesn't make sense if you try to apply it.
Yeah. That's kind of, I'm that way with any industry trends in horses and show horses. I guess maybe it comes with age, but I'm like, stay with the classics. The classics never go out of style. There's always going to be another new fad and another new this or whatever. And in 5 years, they're going to realize how much damage they did chasing that thing. Just stay with the classics,
Basic fundamentals. I mean, it doesn't have to be complicated. You don't have to nail a rocket ship on a horse's foot to fix it. It can be a pretty basic, fundamental, sound shoeing and get the job done.
So since we've broached the subject of hot button topics, natural barefoot trimmers, I would say one of the things that I kind of tend to get from that group, and I'll preface this by saying I have a good friend who is in that group, and I have a fair bit of respect for her. I've seen some others that are kind of religious zealots types, and you can't talk sense to them. But they seem to think that farriers, by and large, don't pay much attention to the trim. What would you say to that?
If you don't pay attention to the trim, you're going to cause problems for the horse. And so, it's one of the 5 boxes that you need to check to be a great farrier is to be good at trimming. You can't be a great farrier and be a bad trimmer. It's just that simple. So I do want to say this, that how somebody shoes a horse, it says nothing about how much God loves them or what kind of person they are. And there's some really, really great shoers that I wouldn't want to spend 2 minutes with. And there's some people that I wouldn't let trim a borrowed donkey that are wonderful, beautiful people. Okay. So I'm not making a judgment on people whenever I say this, but the barefoot trimming thing is ignoring this whole thing about natural. How many things do we do every single day of our life to avoid nature? We wake up in a bed that's under a roof inside of a house. And that's not natural. We wear clothes and shoes and jackets in cold weather, and we maybe put on sunscreen in the sun, or we wear a hat to keep our ears from getting sunburned. All these things we're doing to avoid nature, and then we want to expose our horses to more nature. And it's really, nature's cruel. Nature is a frozen pond that a horse can't drink from, or dying from a small infection. So we're trying to avoid nature everywhere else, and then we try to apply it to a horse's foot. If the wear exceeds the growth, you need to protect it. It is just that simple. So if you're using your horse and you're using it in a way that the foot can't grow fast enough to replace itself for what you rode, you need shoes. It's very simple.
Yes, sir.
In my opinion, Daniel, I guess I shouldn't.
Yeah, I had literally a full page of accomplishments for you, so I think your opinion's probably worth more than a lot of people. So you brought up the Mustangs, and I'm a science background guy. I do actually read research papers, the 37 pages of modalities and graphs and the stuff most people would not want to play with. And awesome. One of the things that I learned from that sometimes is how flawed research can be. Where maybe most people read the abstract or they hear the blurb from it in the end, and they don't realize how specifically targeted the environment was. And if you take the environment and change it, then the whole thing falls apart on you. So for instance, all of the research done on desert Mustangs, I know that the hoof that you get from a horse that comes in from West Texas for training and the hoof that we have here in South Louisiana and our moist soils, those two hooves don't look or act anything alike. I guess, how much of the Mustang research have you paid attention to, and do you find it to be as important or game changing as some would tout it to be?
So one of the very big problems we have in this industry is that so much of the stuff that happens is anecdotal. So instead of being scientific research that would adhere to any standards of the scientific method, we end up with a story that somebody said, and it may be based on 20 horses or even 50 horses that are in a single environment, but all of these horses' feet become products of the environment they're in. So I did some clinics in Australia. One of them was with Chris Pollitt, and he had the I want to say it was Hansen, but I stand to be corrected just in case I got the name wrong. But they took some animals from a very wet environment and put them in a dry environment without trimming them or doing anything, and their feet changed from the long toe with a lot of flair to a small little nub of a foot from the desert environment, and they captured those animals again and took them back to the wet environment, and the foot changed again. So all that's telling you is that the feral horse model, if you will, is only giving you a model for that particular horse in that particular environment, and it doesn't really say much about the guy who has a horse in Louisiana or in Arizona.
Mm-hmm. So I was actually going to bring up that one or one similar. I had heard one in Australia where they did something similar. They took the dry desert horses and brought them to the marshland, and the marsh horses to the desert. Only in this one, the marsh horses in the desert were all so lame after 2 weeks that they had to gather them back up or they were going to die because their hooves had just couldn't take that rapid of of a shift of environment, and then they basically had to end the experiment and save them.
Was that?
I'm not sure. I actually looked for it before this and I couldn't re-find it. It's probably been 5 or 6 years ago that I had read that one, but I just thought that was one of those things that, like, arsenic's 100% natural. Those horses on no feed, no grain, not in a stall, not being ridden, and in the desert environment, unlike anything I'll ever ride a horse in, is maybe not applicable to what I'm trying to do on a day-to-day basis around here. So the hard conclusions that people draw from that sometimes is maybe not as relevant as they want it to be. So a couple other industry, I don't want to keep using the word fads, but trends maybe that I wanted to ask you about were adhesive type shoes and pour-in type pads, the acrylic stuff that seems to be taking over. And I guess I come at that from 2 ways. One, on the pour-in type pads, do you feel like that's actually having an adverse reaction in the industry because it's sort of taking away from skills that should be there because we have an easier, I guess, like your military school background, maybe we're losing the hard fought skills and we've got an easier crutch that we can jump on that doesn't require nearly as much skill? Or am I totally off base on that?
Well, at the end of the day, it's irrelevant. There's nothing that weighs your truck down more than a lack of skill. So I really believe the skills are very important. But if I have a lame horse and I'm trying to save the horse, I don't care if the shoe is cut out with a plasma cutter or made by a world champion blacksmith. I don't care as long as I get results. So ultimately, if the pour-ins are giving us results, or the acrylics are giving us results, I'm not against them. For me, I came up in a time in this industry where if you wanted a bar shoe, you had to make a bar shoe. If you wanted a patent bar, you dang sure had to be able to build a patent bar. You couldn't really buy anything, and none of us had welders back in the day in our trucks. So if you wanted to weld something, you lit your forge and you put flux on it and you welded it, like we still do at the school. So those skills are very valuable, but it doesn't mean that you can't get results by welding a plate into a shoe with a welder, or using acrylic, or using the pour-in. I was really late coming to the pour-in game. They gave me a bunch of free stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I don't need that. It's not, it's not for me." And once I started using it, I found that I was getting good results with heart bars, and I got way better results whenever I use heart bars with the pour-in inside of them. So they're definitely have their place. In a perfect world, all farriers would be, journeyman level, and they'd be able to make shoes, and they'd be able to weld their own bar shoes, and they'd be able to do all that stuff. But in reality, not everybody's going to learn to do that. And you can save a lot of horses by fabricating shoes and doing things in modern materials that, and it's not wrong if you save the horse, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, I have to say I've used them to help myself, but I certainly don't consider myself on the tip of the spear skills wise or anything. So I'm one of those guys that needs the crutch.
But that's okay. I mean, that's if you're helping the horse, then
we accomplished what we needed to accomplish for sure.
So that's good.
So what about the glue-on type shoes? Do you deal very much with that? Is that one of the things you teach at the school, or?
Unfortunately, I've only glued on about 10 shoes in my whole career. It's been outside of my wheelhouse. So we live in an area where I'm not going to be working with a vet very often. And so most of the time I'm having to kind of make up the shoeing strategy on the fly and kind of out of my own head, not with a lot of diagnostics behind it. So I think there's 7 main shoes that if a horseshoer learns how to make and fit, you can take care of most problems. So your straight bar, your egg bar, your heart bar, W shoe, those kind of shoes, extensions, a patent bar, a Z bar, and a toe extension. If you learn how to do those 7 shoes, there's not a whole lot you can't do with the bottom of a horse's foot anyway. And so if you
if you can figure out a way to make one of those shoes and get it nailed on, you can do a lot of good without a lot of help.
And then the other thing I wanted to talk with you about, this to me kind of goes sort of with the breakover, but I haven't been in the horse world as long as you have. I'm not quite to 30 years yet, but to me, the prevalence of navicular syndrome has just grown and grown and grown and grown to the point where it seems like 1 out of every 5 horses has got symptoms of it at this point in time. So I wanted to get your take on that, and if that is, I guess, first of all, what you think, or if you have an opinion on what causes of that might be, if it's a husbandry issue or if maybe it's more on the diagnostic side. I kind of feel like the way I understand it is navicular disease is when we can actually x-ray the foot and see bony changes in the navicular bone, and navicular syndrome is more, we've got pain somewhere in the back half of this foot. I'm not sure what it is, so it's navicular syndrome. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's kind of what my experience has taught me.
Those are great definitions to start with. But I will say that I've had horses in my book that have had bony changes in the navicular bone, but were sound. And then oftentimes you'll get a horse that has all the classic navicular symptoms, but then there is no radiographic changes. Now, we don't get to really pursue MRI and some of that stuff, but I do know that in some areas where they're able to use these very expensive tools, they're able to find things that maybe there's no bone changes, but they find lesions on the deep flexor tendon that passes over the podotrochlear bursa that are giving the horse the navicular reaction. Okay, so to answer your first question, why do I think this has happened? I've been around horses pretty much I'm 53 now, and I've been around horses my whole life. And we had navicular even whenever I was a kid. My dad had a horse on the ranch that ended up with navicular syndrome, and they ended up nerving it. But I think there's been several things that have happened that I've seen happen through my career. First of all, I need to let you know I am a big-time creationist. And so I am a young earth creationist. I believe the Bible kind of tells us history. Evolution to me takes a whole lot more faith than to believe in creation. And the more I study this, the more I'm in awe that evolution ever became a theory. Now, I know a lot of people think that you're dim when you say that, but if you don't know where you stand, you should study this really hard. So there's something called genetic entropy. And so entropy means kind of like the winding down or the deterioration of a system. And the mutations that happen in a genetic model as it continues to have these mutations, and it gets worse and worse and worse. It doesn't get better. Your horse is not going to turn into a unicorn. Evolution, I don't believe is happening. I think the opposite is happening. So with genetic entropy, coupled with the fact that oftentimes horses are bred because they're trying to breed for color, or they're trying to breed for, maybe the shape of a head or something. Or worse yet, we can't use that mare, so let's go ahead and breed her because she's too lame to use. Let's breed her. So that's even worse. And so we have passed on a lot of these problems. And the veterinarian technology has allowed horses to be used and perform and win because they're able to inject joints, and they're able to do all these other things from a veterinarian side of things that are allowing other horses to then pass on more bad genetic mutations or bad genetic traits. And so all of this has come to a head. It actually hadn't come to a head yet, but all of this is coming to a head, and we're dealing with more and more and more of it as horse owners, riders, or farriers.
Okay.
So I hope that.
Yeah. So what would be, let's say, because this is such a common deal, like I have a horse in the pasture right now that's about 13. He belongs to a friend of mine, and he's gotten navicular to the point where, he's not usable anymore. And in fact, if he was mine, I would probably be putting him down at this point. But what would be a generic sort of prescription, a direction you would head with one of these horses? What would be some advice you might have for us?
All right. So there's a couple of things. Do you happen to have my book, Daniel?
I do not. I didn't even know. So I was doing the research on this. I didn't know you had written one, but I will shortly.
Okay. Well, there's a concept called moving the stone. And so I had a good friend. He used to say you get used to anything except for a stone in your boot. And so sometimes you'll go to a clinic as a horseshoer, you go to a clinic and the horse comes in lame and they put something weird and crazy on and the horse walks out way better. And so all of a sudden you're like, oh man, look at that name your product, fix the horse. And so what they did do is they moved the stone. So let's say you're lame, you got a stone in the heel of your boot and it's sore and it's bothering you and you start limping. You finally stop, you shake your shoe, you shake your boot and you get it to move to the toe of your boot. So now you're not nearly as lame. You still have a stone in your boot, but it's in a different spot. And so after a while, then you start to get sore again. So with navicular, I have had instances where you stand the horse up and he'd get better for a cycle, maybe two. And then if you went with a shallow angle, he got better for a cycle or two. And so more or less, I call that moving the stone. So that's one thing you might consider. Another thing is navicular is not something you're going to fix. It's not, you can't shoo away arthritic changes. It's just unfortunately, it's not something that you might be able to manage a little bit, but you're not going to fix. But if the horse has a lifestyle that is very controlled, so the horse is going from pasture to an arena to a barn to a trailer, not a mountain trail horse, not a horse that they're going to go work cattle on, or not a ranch horse, but just a very, very specific job, then doing a low nerving where they cut the palmar digital nerve, that's not a bad option. It at least takes away the pain response for the horse and allows them to live. Even if you don't use them, it allows them to live with a little bit more comfort. So you really got to take the horse's situation into account, because once you take away that sensation from the horse's foot, he becomes a very dangerous animal. He could pull his foot off in a cattle guard and not know it because he doesn't feel it, or he could become very clumsy because he doesn't know where the ground is anymore. Mm-hmm. And so you do want to be careful whenever you go get a nerving for a navicular horse. But in my mind, there are some horses that's the best route. Okay. Shoeing wise, generally speaking, you make the angle more steep. You can take weight off of the deep flexor or take stress off the deep flexor as it passes over the navicular bone. So that little area is called the podotrochlea bursa, and that's where the deep flexor passes over. And so by making the foot more steep with less stress on the deep flexor, there is less stress on the navicular region, as a generic answer.
So this is probably not something that'll be very relevant for whoever is listening, but since I've got you here, I got to ask. I have, in the last couple of years, had 2 horses in for training that I suspect had DSLD. And this is not something I've really ever come across. They're both quarter horses, and my understanding is that's more common in like walking horses and all of that. But would you educate me a little bit on that? I think I know kind of where it's heading with both of the horses, but I was going to try to maybe put some hind shoes with trailers, give them a little more posterior support. Is this just
once the suspensory apparatus is broken down to that point, it doesn't really matter what you put on the bottom. You're probably not ever going to find a shoeing strategy that will stand that pastern back up or restore that balance. Unfortunately, there are things that finally break and they can't be fixed, and it's a really sad thing on some of those horses. But we do see it on a lot of old brood mares and of all breeds, not just a walking horse or something. And the fishtail or trailers or any of that, I don't think they really help. I think it is just what it is. If they get so bad that you can't shoe them anymore because they're so lame on the right foot, you can't pick up the left foot, that horse you really need to consider
putting him down.
Yeah.
The horse that I've got in right now, I kind of feel like he's in the early stages of it. I mean, his fetlocks aren't hitting the ground or anything like that, but I feel like that's what's going on. He hasn't seen a vet or anything, but I've watched a few horses walk around and I know what the hind leg's supposed to look like. And he's 10% beyond that or whatever. What's the rate of progression, would you say? Is this, he's got a few years maybe, or not that much, or what?
Depends on how heavy he is and how old he is. So if it's a really fat young horse, then you can lighten them up and maybe manage it a little bit. But if you're talking about a 22-year-old broodmare, man, is going to be going fast.
Well, I think this is a horse that could stand to lose some weight, and I think he's about 15 or so. So,
he's on the border. I would definitely try to make him a much thinner animal, and give him a little bit of exercise. But yeah, there's so many factors. There's really not a direct answer for you on that, Daniel.
So I've got another question for you here. This is actually from a person asked me to ask you this question, but they wanted to know what are some of the specific things that you look for to determine whether a horse has a pain issue or a dysfunctional movement issue. So I guess, when farrier's asking you to walk the horse away and walk him back and turn him and so forth, what specifically are you looking for?
The best gait is a trot, because it's a diagonal 2-beat gait, and it's easier for our eye to see when only 2 feet are hitting the ground at the same time. So as the horse is moving, if I can watch how his head bob is in relation to his whatever foot's bearing weight, generally speaking, let's say the horse is lame on the right fore. As the right fore hits the ground, he's going to throw his head up, and his near fore is going to come down a little bit earlier. Or it's going to look like a short stride. It's not truly a short stride, but it's going to come down earlier in relation to how far the right front goes beyond it. So that one's a very easy one to see. If you have a grade 3 lameness, an early abscess or something, you can see that horse trot, and even a non-horse person can say, "Oh yeah, the right front's lame." Beyond that, the flexion tests are very handy.
Just let me, since you said that, I was just going to summarize that as down on sound. That's what we're always looking for. The head is down on the sound foot, and it's up on the unsound foot. So, okay.
Yeah,
sorry.
But that's excellent. I'd never heard that, but that's excellent. And the short stride's a misnomer. You know that whole argument? Have you been down that road of a short stride?
No.
Have you ever seen a horse lame and seen he has a short stride?
I've seen, I guess predominantly if I'm thinking of that, I'm thinking of a hind foot, maybe with a stifle issue that's not reaching as far under as the opposite hind foot appears to. Like I guess your argument a minute ago, those horses don't seem to walk in circles. So I guess they managed to even it up somehow, but.
Exactly. So all the feet have to go the same distance. Because if you had one foot that was, 6 inches shorter than the others, then it would end up being it ended up being still back at the trailer when the horse is at the arena, So they've all got to go the same length. But whenever you see what they call a short stride, people are comparing when the foot passes the opposite limb, they're comparing that area of the step, which is the swing phase of the step in front of the other limb, and they're not considering the part behind that. So the foot that appears to have a short stride, it should be called a short step. The one that appeared to have that short step will have a shorter dorsal phase of the swing phase and a long palmar phase. And then the opposite will have a short palmar but a long dorsal. So the short stride or the short step is actually a misnomer. And it's funny. I've had vets that they stick to it. It's a short stride, by golly, and it just can't be anything else. But in reality, it can't have a short stride and still go straight.
That might be when they need to be paying attention to breakover a little bit more, huh?
Okay. Yeah, give them more break to fix it for sure. There's no doubt.
All right. So I have a totally off the wall question for you here. We are both aviation enthusiasts. So
yes, sir.
What are you flying?
I have a PA 32R T300 Lance T-tail, and I have the very last straight tail that came off the line in 1978, and the very first T-tail that Piper ever made. So it was their test plane, and so the first 200 hours was Piper's engineers and test pilots flying it around before they came out with the T-tail, and then the first owner worked for Star Trek. So our number is November 1701 Echo, which is the Starship Enterprise. So we call it the Enterprise.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's a really cool plane. And Cody flies the little 1964 Dakota. And I mean, it's a it's a 28 235, and I mean that sucker, it'll take off on a postage stamp. It's like a sports car. I'm driving an old Suburban, he's driving an old sports car. What do you fly?
I don't actually have a plane right now. I'm my father-in-law has got a couple, and my other bucket list item is to build a STOL plane. So like we're not that far from the Mississippi River. The whole sunset landing on sandbars in the river is like my nirvana, but I haven't gotten there yet.
Do you have your PPL and your
I do not. I've got some of my hours, but I'm not completed with it. It just hasn't been. We still have young kids in school and all, and it gets hard to justify, being selfish and spending that much money and time on something that's just for me. So,
you must not have the right accountant. There's always a way to justify it.
But one thing I did want to tell you, and hey, podcast community, if you want to cut out on this, that's fair enough. But clinician perks, I'm sure you've had clinician perks here and there. I have a group I do clinics for in South Carolina, and one of the ladies' husband was an F-18 squadron commander at the Marine base over there. And he got me an hour and a half in an F-18 simulator on base. And man, that's a bucket list item I didn't know I had. Let me tell you, that was super cool. You're in basically, you got the cockpit and you're inside a globe that turns with you real time, and then the seat tilts and stuff. And, you don't feel G-forces, but that's about the only part of the experience you're missing. I was a solid 4 out of 10 nauseous when I got out of that thing. I mean, it was.
You were without pulling G's, huh?
Yeah. So I got to land on an aircraft carrier 4 times. I got to shoot ships, blow down bombers. It was, and you have unlimited ammo. I mean, it's great. It's highly recommend. So,
Daniel, that's phenomenal.
When they told me about it, I thought, all right, I'm going to get like 15 minutes or something, and it's going to be over before I know it. And then her husband used to train people on it. So he's literally standing right there telling me what to do and not over telling me, I only killed myself once. I was pretty proud of that. I was coming down to shoot a ship in the canal, and I forgot to take my afterburner off. So I went into the Atlantic at 800 miles an hour. But I only did it once, so I learned my lesson. But anyway, I thought you would appreciate that.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. I would love that experience. That'd be cool.
So my final question for you, what does success look like to you? I think you're pretty well living it right now, but what goals do you have? What legacy do you want to leave? What's the deal for you?
So, I see the world a little different than some people. My world is not about money. We turn away like 50 students a year. 2022 is completely booked, and so I'm turning away people. It's an interesting position to be in. But we could easily build another barn and hire instructors and make more money. But it's really not about money. So for me, it's about lifestyle. And so you have to have enough money to do what you want to do. But if you'll figure that out early, then and so for simple numbers, for a horseshoer's perspective, let's say success to you would be $100,000 in a year. Well, if you can shoe horses for $100 a horse and you do 1,000 horses in a year, which would be 20 horses a week, that would be success. And then if you're only shooting 20 horses a week, you also have, it's like a part-time job. So you'd have time to go become a better roper or get your PPL and start flying, your STOL plane or whatever it is. So for me, success really is living the lifestyle that you want to live. And it doesn't matter if it's my lifestyle doesn't have to be like anybody else's. It's just whatever's right for you, you need to achieve. So that's success. Very good.
Well, that's pretty much all the questions that I've got for you. I know I could sit here and talk to you for a couple more hours, but I'm sure you've got things to do, and you've been generous enough with your time. So, Chris, it has been a true pleasure. I really appreciate you doing this, and maybe we'll talk to you again, have you on again in a couple of years or something.
Daniel, it was it was really nice to meet you. I've enjoyed it. You did a fantastic job as a podcast host. So I look forward to getting to spend some time with you, sir. Thank you very much.
Absolutely.
All right. God bless.
That's been another episode of Adult Onset Horsemanship. Thank you very much for listening. We appreciate your time.